Hello, Sit Room executives. Welcome back to another episode. Lane Kawaoka is a former civil engineer that used to work in the corporate world as a construction engineer. Today, he owns 3,200 units, is a writer for Forbes, a top 50 investing podcaster, and an Amazon bestseller. Well, Lane, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate having you.
Yeah, aloha everybody. It's cool 70 degrees here in Hawaii.
I would love to be there with you right now. What part of Hawaii are you in?
I'm living Honolulu, which is the island of Oahu.
Oh, okay, great. And speaking of that, I was doing a little bit of background research, and I saw that you were in Seattle and I believe in Indiana and a few other states. So how did you end up in Hawaii? Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I grew up here in Hawaii, but the schools aren't the greatest out here, and neither are the jobs. So I went to school up at University of Washington, and I was there for 14 years until I finally had enough passive income where I could move home back home to paradise, where I didn't really need to work at a job, and so that's my life today. Just kind of the life of the investor, playing on the
Oh,
computer all day long.
all right. And so professionally, your background was in what field?
I was a civil engineer in industrial engineering, and did a lot of construction projects, project management, that kind of stuff originally.
Okay. And so how did you initially get interested in real estate investing?
Yeah, so I was a accidental landlord. Was living that whole linear life of go to school, study hard, get a good job, buy that house to live in, which I don't think is the good thing for people that live in primary markets. But that's what I did in Seattle. I bought a house to live in. I was never home because I was traveling all the time, which is typically what younger, newer people have to do. And realized I should just rent it out. And my mortgage was like 20 or 1,600, and my rents were 2,200. So for a younger 20-something-year-old kid, it was a lot of beer money. And combined with the fact that I didn't really like my job as an engineer, I was like, this is my ticket out of this rat race. So that was the start of things, and just started to pick up more and more rentals after that.
Okay. All right. And so you started accidentally by having that first property in Seattle. So how did you get into the other homes, and kind of what markets were you looking into? Did you start locally, or what did you do?
Yeah, I continued to buy another duplex in Seattle, but that took a couple years to save up my money. And then that was around 2012 when the market started to come back up, and I wasn't cash flowing anymore. And I was like, what the heck? What is this? I can't cash flow. And then I learned that, sophisticated investors don't really invest in primary markets for appreciation. They go after cash flow first. So that was when I tried out one of these turnkey rentals in Birmingham. So then I got proof of concept there, sold those two Seattle rentals, and then I did a 1031 exchange, and I found myself having 11 rentals in Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis by the year 2015. And then created a headache for myself.
So you traded the your original properties, you rolled those over into other properties in a secondary market. You said in the Midwest is what you did via 1031.
That's correct. That's correct. I'm not a big fan of 1031s today, but that was all I knew back then, right? I
Uh-huh.
mean, I didn't know anybody else who was doing this stuff. Everybody thought I was crazy buying all these properties sight unseen.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So that's quite interesting, actually. So you mentioned here how in some of the primary markets you mentioned something along the lines of appreciation versus cash flow. And I know I remember you had mentioned that appreciation you feel is more speculative. Can you tell our listeners what exactly you mean by that, and how important that is that they understand the difference between the two when they're
Yeah,
considering investing?
I mean, like when you're not doing anything and just buying a property and letting the market take you up to a higher level. I mean, maybe that is just me, my outlook on life, but easy come, easy go, right? We've been on a bull market for the last 14 years, but it doesn't mean that that's will continue to forward. At the end of the day, you want cash flow because cash flow is what puts food on the table. And back then, my goal was to quit my day job. So I needed to create cash flow so I didn't have to work for a paycheck. So that's what I focused on. Now, don't get me wrong, definitely a beneficiary of some nice appreciation. You know, those Seattle properties went up by a couple $100,000 each. And that's what I used to parlay into more cash flow. Appreciation is definitely how you get rich, but cash flow keeps you in the game. Think of it like as oxygen.
Got it. So how did you make that transition, and at what point did you realize that you wanted to get into multifamily, that multifamily syndications was the way to go?
Yeah, so with those 11 turnkey rentals, and that term turnkey is always a little bit iffy, right? And it can be many things, but they were essentially turnkey rentals, B class price. You know, they all rented for at least $950, so they weren't $50,000-$60,000 pieces of junk. But I had problems. I had my property manager there, but still, I mean, with 10, 11 rentals, you're going to have an eviction or two a year. You're going to have some kind of big issue that comes up for, an HVAC goes out, a plumbing fix that costs $1,000. Granted, you're just typing this to your property manager and keeping them accountable, but 10, 11 rentals, that's just what, $3,000 passive a month at a few $100s per property. And I don't know who can survive on $3,000. I needed more like 10 grand. And so you need 30 properties. So you just multiply those numbers by 3, that's an eviction every other month and some kind of catastrophe every couple of weeks. Like, this is not scalable, right? And then you combine that with the fact that sophisticated investors, they need to roll their equity over from time to time, right? When the property appreciates and they pay down their principal, they have more equity. And that return on equity, which is so important, that percentage keeps coming down, 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 down. And you need to re-leverage it. With all these single properties, it's impossible to effectively leverage your capital. I mean, 1031s are one of the most impractical things that are talked about so much. I don't know why people do them. I mean, you can't find a deal in 45 days, like, unless you're buying some kind of lukewarm deal. So that's where I the big thing for me was getting around other high net worth investors, other doctors, lawyers, engineers, dentists. And, I'm no dummy. I just copy what other people that I want to do.
All right. So walk us through really quickly here this mindset, the mindset shift, because if you think about it, and I think for a lot of our listeners, they would look at that as being a big jump, going from 11 single family properties to, let's say, 1 or 200 apartment unit building, or a syndication, right? So how exactly did you get through that or over that hump and actually into your first deal?
I just invested 50 grand and I tried to read 150-page PPM and I signed my name, and that was it. It was the easiest transaction I ever did in my life.
All right. So you jumped in as an LP.
Right.
Okay. All right. And then that kind of got you, you kind of developed a higher level of comfortability with it, and that kind of just set the stage. So then at what point did you begin running deals yourself?
So about a while there, I was trying to find my own deals, right? But my skill set was not sucking up the brokers, because brokers control the deals, especially when you're looking at stabilized assets bigger than 60 units. And living in Seattle, or if you live in Hawaii or you live in California, unless you're Superman, you get the odds stacked against you. And I'm going to say I don't know how you're doing it. I wouldn't invest in your deal, to be honest, if you live out in those, if you don't live where the deal is.
Hmm.
So I kind of focused on, finding deals to jump into and then kind of working from that angle. And, the I went into that first passive deal after about a year and a half. I'm not getting anywhere because after all, me and my partner back then, we only had about 30 units, 40 units to our name, and they were most of single families type, and no broker cares about that.
Hmm.
They only care if you own 100, 200 unit apartment buildings, and they, for good reason. It's totally different.
Got it. So let's kind of like reflect back and kind of just review a lot of the experience, because you have a wealth of experience. You've been doing this for quite some time now. So what would you say were some of the biggest challenges that you face, either deal specific or within your business?
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to what I said, like I'm not good at finding deals. I
Hmm.
don't want to build rapport and talk to brokers. I just don't get along with them. So I'm going to find somebody and partner with who has the deal flow and who has those broker relationships.
And so how would you go about doing that, finding and identifying the right partners? Because there are
So
a lot of people out there.
I mean, that's where like one thing that helped me is I learned how to underwrite deals myself,
Mm.
right? Because you go around, everybody has a nice profile picture. Everybody has a nice shiny PDF. Everybody has their one nice suit that they own. How do you tell like who's real? Well, numbers don't lie, right? I'm going to pull the P&Ls and the rent rolls, put it into my analyzer and see what we're working with here and what kind of assumptions that are being used in the deal. And I'll tell you the integrity of the operator from that point. But that was kind of a starting point. You know, if the numbers work, then I'll kind of, take that next step and start to build a relationship from there out. But
Okay.
numbers first, right?
So you typically, when you're vetting your operators, you typically will look at, let's say they'll submit a deal or something to you. What's that process look like? And then, or do you, or I think I might be misunderstanding, or do you build a relationship first? Like, take for me, for example, like I focus on building the relationship first before I consider anything that they have.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
question. Because I don't really
Uh-huh.
know what comes first. It's kind of a chicken and an egg thing. Honestly, it would probably be the numbers first.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm an engineer. I'm an introvert. I don't care for talking to people too much, right? Like I get tired. So I'm gonna go after the numbers first. But you're right, right? Sometimes you meet people first and you get along. It can be that way, but I would tend to kind of do it a different way.
Got it. So yeah, I mean, you're right. There are a lot of operators. I was actually on a call just the other day. It was held by another syndicator that I know, and she had invited a financial analyst on the show, and it was really interesting, some of the things that he mentioned. And one of the things he had pointed out, which I knew before as well, I have my background is financial analysis too, but and a lot of people don't know that just small manipulations, even with things like the exit cap, by just a few basis points, he had just changed it by like 25 basis points, and the IRR had increased by about 3 or 4%, in the model. And it made the model, it made the deal look outstanding, actually. It went from like a 15% IRR to a 19% IRR. So when you're looking at these models, what are some of the key things that you look at?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, unless you know how to put it into the model and you have the data, right? You can't do
Mhm.
this. But I've stayed home on Friday evenings because I got nothing better to do and play around with it. And you're exactly right. If you change that reversion cap to, most people will say like, to be conservative, you want to increase the reversion cap 0.5% to a full percent point. So for example, if your prevailing cap rate is 5.5%, you want to use, let's just say 6.5% on the reversion cap. It's a little counterintuitive because you're thinking, oh, you're increasing the cap, but trust me, when you go by your NOI divided by cap, when the cap gets bigger, that means you're selling it into a weaker market. So the reversion cap is your exit cap, and that's what you're assuming that you're going to sell in. And I don't know about you, but I like to assume that things are going to be crappier in the future just to be safe. So you want to increase that reversion cap. But, I don't know if these are exact what they are, but I've played around it with, like, say you get like 100% return in 5 years. That's what the model shows. But if I decrease the or increase the reversion cap from a plus 0.5% to a full percent point, what it should be, that 100% return in 5 years might go down to like 60 or 70%. So that's a big one. Number two, rent increases per year, right? Like if somebody is showing 3% rent increases per year, well, it better be in the state of California, Denver, Washington, where they're smoking a lot of Pacololo out there, because that ain't gonna happen, right? Like if you're showing 100% return in 5 years at 3% rent increases, and when I normalize it down to maybe at 1.5 or 2% rent increases per year, that 100% will go down to like 60% return in 5 years, a delta of 40%. So that one's huge, and I think that one's not talked about as much because it just seems so minute, right? Like what's the difference in 2 and 3%? But it's a huge, huge thing, especially when you're applying that factor to every single year.
Yeah.
And it's an escalator. Those are the two big ones. If you twisted my arm on a third one, I would say it's like what economic occupancy is used, not really occupancy. Economic occupancy is always that really matters, because you're always going to have some deadbeats not paying. Usually you want to assume 2 or 3% for that. But yeah, I mean, those are kind of the big things from an LP's perspective to look at. I mean, most LPs don't have a clue how to put this into a model, nor would I expect them to. Nor are they given the P&Ls and rent rolls on any of this stuff. Most syndicators would probably not include an investor if they started to ask for that stuff. It's already a telltale that that person's annoying, But those are the things that, you can kind of pick up on if you're kind of, looking through a deck. I think sometimes those things will be said.
Okay. So once you look at this and let's say that you identified it's something that they seem reasonable. So then what would be the next step for you?
Next step is I'm going to go to my network, and I need to know somebody who's invested with them in the past and can vouch for them. Not some guy who says, yeah, that guy does really good stuff, and come to find out that guy who said that has never invested, and they don't have a clue what a T12 is. So you only go off of people who have put their own money in the game and have actually tested them. And that's where this is like your network is your net worth. But unfortunately, if you're not in any deals, even if you got some money and if you're not in any deals, like really, why are these people going to talk to you, right? You don't bring any value to the interaction. Maybe you can buy them a bottle of Camus or something like that. But, and this is why people skills are important, I guess.
So you mentioned earlier that your background is engineering, and you also mentioned that you're introverted, right? So what would you're talking about you going to your network and talking to these people and people skills. So for our listeners out there that are introverted and they like to hide behind their computers, how do they get over that hump?
They suck it up. Right? It's like the whole thing, like if your baby's over that wall and you got to go talk to someone, damn it, you're going to go talk to that person. Right? You do what's important for your family.
Mm-hmm.
I when I was in corporate America, or when I was like working at this one company where it's more of a blue collar environment, I had this like one guy, he said like, well, I don't wear like I don't wear like a suit to interviews, right? You know, I'm more of a blue jeans kind of a guy. And then I was like, yeah, I guess that's more of a cowboy thing to say. But I was like, that's stupid, man. This is gonna get your family potentially an extra $5,000 to $10,000 a year. You put on those slacks and you wear that tie that you don't have, and you get up there, you do it for your family. So yeah, it's not comfortable, right? But you just do it.
So basically, doing whatever it takes.
I guess, right? I mean, maybe do something else, right? Or like a lot of people like I work with, like they might just be starting out with a turnkey rental, right? And they're like,
Mhm.
oh, this is hard. I gotta, there's all this junk, and yeah, you're in your, this day and age, 2020, like deals are hard to find. And I'm like, look, man, you don't have to do it. You can keep working at your day job for the next 40 years. But we know what's going to happen if you keep doing that, right? Are you cool with that? Or you want to talk to somebody, you know? You want to get in, you know, I don't know. I don't know what to tell, you know? Obviously, most people aren't going to do anything, right?
Yeah.
But just don't complain about it. And if you can't do it, then just go back to work and don't complain for 40, 50 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I think because I would consider myself maybe about 60% introverted and 40% extroverted. I'm extroverted when I want to be, but mostly introverted. And yeah, I think it was a really long process. Like it took me years to just get over that hump. But like you said, um, just going out and doing it, it was extremely uncomfortable. And I would just set little targets for myself. I would just say, okay, I see this person, just go talk to them. Don't even think about it. And I would just start the action. And I guess for me, just that process of starting that action put me in a position where, oh, I had no choice, because by the time I walked over to that person, it would just be kind of weird if I didn't say anything at that point. I'm standing right in front of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes sometimes it seems like we're talking about dating right here, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it's
that's
the
right.
same thing. Look, are you just gonna be single your whole life and not do anything? Or you're
Yeah,
gonna suck it up and do it,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? I mean, yeah, I guess you can work on some text game and play on the internet a little bit more, but like, this is the shortest path, right? Talking to people from A to B.
Yeah,
Everybody else is going to do, play on some forums on the computer, and then there's also a bunch of sharks in there too, right?
yeah,
I mean, so it's just like do what others aren't good at, right? I think that can be taken into so many things,
yeah,
right? Like everybody's doing multifamily these days, right? Is that the best thing to do? Maybe not, right? A lot of dumb money is going to multifamily apartments. Where is it that people aren't going? Mobile home parks are dirty, right? They don't like that. Maybe that's a good thing to go. Um, Another thing is life settlements, right? What the heck is life settlements? We'll Google it right now. Nobody's Googling it. That's exactly why you should do it, because nobody's going to look at it.
mm,
The unknown.
yeah. So I take it that you're diversified, so not just multifamily, correct?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing I kind of picked up from these like higher level investors. They diversify in different asset classes, because you never know how the government could just start building class C apartments just like how they do in Asia. And you don't know. Um I like real estate. I mean, that's just where I started, right? But I mean, that doesn't mean that I won't go to, I mean, I just invested in an oil and gas deal recently just to see how that goes. Again, I think the stuff I'm doing for that is I'm like kind of conceptualizing, like learning how people like move to something that they aren't uncomfortable with, like a turnkey rental or a multifamily syndication. How am I doing it again? I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna put in an investment and see how it goes, right?
Mhm.
Like, if unless you put skin in the game, you don't really start to learn something. Um,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true. Yeah, you're absolutely you're absolutely right. You when you say you have to put skin in the game, because otherwise you won't learn. Like I remember when I first started playing around with stocks, it wasn't until I actually put money into the market that I realized I was staring at my screen every single day. But before that, I wasn't staring at my screen.
Right. Right. And then, once you have a couple holdings, now you can like go talk to people and have something to talk about. Right. And maybe you might
Yeah.
tell them some feedback on what operators you've been using, or some things, do you want to do deep well drilling? Do you want to do shallow well drilling? Right. You can offer some value to people. And then that's when the magic happens. You find one or two people and they know 10 people. And then now your network is 20.
Yeah. So the this oil, if I may ask, the oil and gas deal, what exactly is that?
Um, just it's super simple. It's
Mhm.
lot less complicated than multifamily. You just stick a hole in the ground and you hit some oil and you pump it back up to earth. And you sell that thing at like $55 a barrel, I think. And it's that's why I like it, right? Like I like
Uh-huh.
these like things I can understand. That's like um yeah, it's just very basic, right?
Mhm.
And what the operations is a crew of guys that have monkey wrenches and some machinery, and they fix those things when they don't work, right? You got to change out a motor, right? You're down for 4 hours, you replace that thing, and there you go, and you got six of them for a little diversification.
All right, that's interesting. Yeah. Very, very straightforward. Like you said, very
Right, right.
doesn't
And
get
and, it, and
easier than
and
that.
it's cool too. Like, you saw everyone's seen all the Western movies, right?
Yeah.
When they put that thing in the ground, and I don't know if it's quite like that. Yeah, I'm sure you just see it on the piece of paper, right? Like the numbers of barrels per day. But
Yeah.
I would like to be there one of these days with that. But it's cool, like, oh, we got a gusher on our hand, 80 barrels a day. Woohoo.
Yeah. Nice. So you have simplepassivecashflow.com. Can you tell our listeners about that?
Yeah, so I started in 2016 as a personal finance blog to people to follow my journey, because I would tell all my friends how I was buying all these turnkey rentals and different properties, and nobody would do it, right? Just like I'm sure we all listen to these podcasts and tell our friends about it, and they all think we're crazy. So I was like, well, screw you guys. I'm just going to record it because I know I'm going to forget all this stuff. And so you guys can read it later. So that's what I did for a few years, and then it got kind of popular. And yeah, I mean, that's what I kind of spend my time on now, that I don't have to go to my engineering job. Just keep writing articles, just doing some podcasts, and then um, you know, finding cool things to invest in. And yeah, it's interesting, like connecting with people like in the venture capital space, that not that they're just putting 50, 100 grand here and there, but just seeing what kind of different lifestyles they live. You know, they don't invest in oil and gas because it hurts the environment, and that's where they are in life. They're more into that type of stuff.
Mhm.
So it's all part of the journey.
So it seems as though the platform that you have, it's grown to be quite large actually, because I noticed that you've expanded it into other aspects such as crowdfunding as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to create a tribe of people that I know personally, that hang out, we do deals together, because I mean, there's not many people that do this stuff right out there. It's a little lonely. um, I got tired of going to like social events where people look at me with cross-eyed when I start talking about not investing in your 401k, or everybody thinks I'm the devil for not like owning my own home that I live in, right? That to sell that primary residence. Like, it's just so alternative that I want to create the community around me of like-minded people so that we could geek out on this stuff. So man, like amazing what the internet does, right? And
Yeah.
then just, I'm just like you too, right? Like I don't like talking about certain things, but when it's something I do, like investing or financial freedom, I get really jazzed up over it. And life's too short to be talking about the 401k and deferred comp plans and lame stuff like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we can't even, and you can't rely on those things, 401k. I mean, it's you look at the number or the amount that was lost in the most recent financial crisis that we had. People, lost, and even those that have their primary residence. Look at the number of people that lost their primary residence. That's exactly why I refuse to buy a personal residence too, because I just see it as a liability. I don't see it as an asset.
Exactly. I mean, right now I rent $1 million house in Hawaii, which sounds expensive, but it's really a piece of junk if you ask me. I mean, it's probably $300,000 in a place like Atlanta. But anyway, this landlord, they own it outright, and I pay $3,000 a month, and I don't fix anything. And after taxes and everything, I'm sure they walk away with half of that, the 50% rule, as we all know. So they're making like 2%, 3% on their money, per year. You tell me who's getting the better idea, the
Yeah.
better deal. But I don't know. I mean, like I think that's what kind of fires me up. Like young people, they make this mistake of buying a house, and then the biggest thing is they lose out on, like, they got to put on a big down payment. Like if I would have bought this house I live in, I would have need at least $200,000 as a down payment, which I could have bought, maybe 8 turnkey rentals, all
Mhm.
producing like a couple $100 of cash flow a month, not to mention the appreciation on all those. And what the sad thing is, like when a young family puts down that down payment, foregoing all that opportunity costs, they also straddle themselves down with like a $4,000 mortgage, and that's all their free cash flow. And cash flow is oxygen. Cash flow gives you
Mhm.
options. They just lost all options, and now they're stuck for the rest of their lives. So um, if you're doing that, hopefully that inspires you not to do that anymore, and drink the Kool-Aid and invest. Invest in assets, right? Your home is not an asset; it's a liability.
Yeah.
And
I'm
yeah, and
sorry.
then don't think of that. People, it drives me crazy, right? Like people say, "Oh, I don't want to rent because I'm throwing money down the drain, and I have to I have to bite my tongue and not say anything. I don't want, my wife says, don't be a jerk, right? Don't tell them that their house is like, or Lane, we have to go to an open house today because my friend bought a house. I'm like, I don't want to go. That's the worst thing. Like, they're screwed. Yeah. So I go on my podcast and I tell the truth, right?
Oh my goodness. You just reminded me. So yeah, because I've been in China for about 10 years. I had a business here. We just sold it last year. And a lot of my friends and people would always say to me, "Oh, why don't you buy a house? It's really important that you buy a house. You have to buy a house. You have to get married. You must buy a car and you do these things." And I said, well, first of all, property prices in Beijing and in Shanghai are just ridiculous.
Right.
In Beijing, your down payment, like my apartment is also, it's a little over $1 million too for this apartment. But just behind me, there are some new apartments going up. And so I just went over for the heck of it just to go see what they're selling for. So those are selling for about $1 million each, and they're only 800 square feet.
Mm.
But 800 square feet, and the down payment is 50%. So 50% down payment you have to put up in cash. Now the rents, if I were to rent it out, I would probably only get about maybe a 0.5% or 1%, not even a full percent cash on cash return.
Yeah. I heard it was like less than, like, rent from a rent to value perspective, it's like less than a quarter, right?
Yeah,
Around
it's
there.
really, really bad.
Yeah.
It's really, really bad. Yeah. It's not worth it. And I just get so many, they think I'm crazy, and it, like, so I can completely relate to you on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. I'll say Asians are crazy with that, right? I can say it because I'm Asian, but yeah, like like I had a buddy and he had a friend that said like, um, oh, dude, I need a new car, right? And he's got like like $100,000 BMW, and he's like, oh, I gotta get a new car because like my 3-year warranty is gone. And I was like, I almost like spat up my drink. I was like, you said what? Like that's their like for some people that's their view of risk, right? Is that like their car warranty is up and that's risky. Therefore, they should get another $150,000 car. Like,
Oh man.
yeah.
Lane, if you were talking to some new people, which I mean, your platform, I know that you have a lot of new people that you interact with on a regular basis, right? I think through your Huey club. And so can you tell us about that and what advice it is that you would have for these new people?
Well, I try not to talk to too many new people. I mean, I have them go through the podcast first and get like a lot of the foundational stuff, right? Like the stuff that we're talking about, you listen to a few podcasts, you start to, drink the Kool-Aid and you start to realize all this bad financial advice out there. But I would say only take a financial advice from people who are financially free. Financial advisors don't know anything. They're just salesmen for stocks and get commissions, right? Find out somebody who's really financially free and take advice from that person.
I love it. I really do. Wonderful. Yeah, you reminded when you said that, I just had this image flash in my mind of back when I was in New York. I worked at this investment bank on Broadway. And just like you said, I mean, a lot of the people in there that I work with at our sales desk, we had about 30 people on our desk. Most of them, we were fresh college graduates. We had no idea what we were doing. And yet we were financial advisors.
Yeah. I mean, even like, CPAs and accountants, I mean, yeah, blah, yeah, I'm not getting financial advice, blah, blah, blah. But look, that's why they have jobs, right? JOB, just over broke. I don't want to listen to
Yep.
some of these guys. Like, what the heck do they know? They're still working the day job. They're still trading their time for money.
Yep. So what's some good reading that I know you have a few books out there that you've published. What's some good reading that you'd suggest?
I'm not a big fan of books. I think people read too many books. But if you're starting out, Real Estate Millionaire Investor by Gary Keller, I think there's a lot of foundational stuff in there. But after that, I would just say buy a property.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, people read too many books and listen to too many podcasts, right? I mean, the psychology is like you want to do something, so you're getting the endorphin hit by just listening to stuff, doing it, right? And you're staying out of your staying in your comfort zone by not doing anything. So, yeah, read that book, and then hopefully you don't read too slowly. But the whole 70-20-10 rule, 70% is doing it, 20% is learning from others or getting mentorship. And then only 10% is the academic side of the actual reading said book.
So focus on the action.
Right. I mean, even podcasts, I mean, those are considered books, like audiobooks.
Yeah.
You get out and buy something. It's not going to be perfect, but it's a start. And then now you can take that and build that relationship with somebody else who's doing something else too.
Okay. So if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, how should they reach out to you?
Yeah, check out my podcast at simplepassivecashflow.com. And then, yeah, connect with me. My email is lane@simplepassivecashflow.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lane, for joining us today. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for changing your schedule around. I know you're there in China. It was hard for us to align the schedules here, but I appreciate that.
No, I appreciate you doing that as well.